great to have you with me on the podcast. I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and, tell us a little bit briefly about you, and then we'll get us into the conversation.
Well, hi, my name is Mo Ghaoui. I'm Palestinian. Technically, it's a refugee status where I lived in Lebanon. And I moved into the States in 2019, end of 2019. And I'm here in Washington, Seattle. I used to work in tech for like 25 years. Not exploring things still right now. So it's a different world here. I had to let go of most of my businesses. And for a change, now we can speak. So that's why you can see me. That's how we met, being politically incorrect and active on social media.
Well, I'd like to think that we're politically correct. It's the other people who are politically incorrect.
Yeah, I know, but just,
Yeah, they don't see it that way. I get it.
Exactly.
So you were born, what part, which city were you born in?
It's in Beirut. It's called Sabra, as in Sabra. People know probably the Sabra and Shatila.
Okay,
That's the most famous part of it.
And did you live in the areas known as Gaza or West Bank?
No, I don't have relatives in Gaza. I only have friends, and most of them I was disconnected from for a long time, and resurrected some friendship recently because of the war. My grandfather originally is from Haifa. He moved in the 48 displacement movement. So they, and that's another thing. There was a lot of stories, and I heard few from my grandfather, and the rest we do have family in the West Bank. Also, basically for the most part of our lives, we didn't really communicate because there was a communication ban. So we literally had, let's say, relatives outside, so they can transport messages in between. Like they can call Lebanon, they can call the West Bank, because anyone having connecting to a 972 number is legally not allowed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did your, growing up, what was your perspective on the Middle East and, and Israel? And you mentioned your grandfather, told some stories. I'm curious to hear what his version of events was.
Honestly, it's part of, they did us a favor. They didn't speak much of it. And one of the stories, let's say about the displacement, unlike the other stories, he told us, no, not everyone left because they were involved in the war. We listened to the Arabs, we listened to the calls like, oh, you can leave, you can come back in 2-3 weeks, and that's it. In fact, especially my family, they weren't, like, my grandfather wasn't a fighter, he was just a farmer, so he didn't have any information beside that, peaceful 1-2 line, and that's it. He never was politically involved. He was a very religious man, on the other hand. My father was a fighter with PLO, and also didn't speak much. He only, maybe at one time, and that was enlightening, maybe I think the conversation happened 25 years ago. He just told me, like, it's all quote unquote, it's like all bullshit. So we didn't know what's happening, and especially that one part of the conversation, and that's literally the only political conversation my dad had with me.
Wow.
Only one. Yeah, and
even though he was part of the PLO.
Yes, because he didn't like what things happened, and specifically there was a part when PLO was actually fighting in between. So that involved a crash course, a lot. Like, we're talking about 15 minutes of crash course conversation about the war, telling me how they allied with, let's say, with Amal. They fought Hezbollah, then they allied with, they fought Amal, then they allied with Amal, then they fought Hezbollah. Then they also were fighting about the other Palestinians who were under the Hafez al-Assad control. So there was a lot of mix. Basically, the civil wars took much, much more than the general, Israeli-Arab war.
Yeah, that's interesting because we definitely just hear about the specifically Israeli Arab war. We don't really hear about the in between fighting, which obviously there was, even just for control within the different regions.
A lot. That's part of the conversation because most people would say, let's say, if you were talking locally to a native, they would, whatever faction it is, they will always be our people or our faction, in fact, because it's never about one people. There's no one Palestinian party, there's no one Lebanese party or one Syrian party. So it's always this faction would say, we were the only ones who didn't have civil blood on our hands. And you're like, yeah, but we just talked about that civil war, which actually had a lot of blood on your hands. There's literally not a single faction who didn't have civil blood on its hands.
Right. For you, not growing up in, I don't even know how to refer to it anymore because either way is going to be politically incorrect at some point. But in the region that was once Palestine, and before that, all sorts of other things. What, why do you consider yourself a Palestinian as opposed to just an Arab? What's sort of the distinctive culture or identity that you feel that it has?
So I don't consider myself anything really. I don't care about the naming or the branding of it. I care about being a human. And same for the other side. Because if you want to look at it, as I said, maybe I based everything in my life, I base it on being non-hypocrite. So I know it's hard, but it's like I have to think about it. So let's move back. Even Israelis were Palestinians at a point of time.
Yeah.
And Palestinians adopted this identity. And here's the like interesting factor. They adopted the identity because one, that's the only identity left. Two, because every Arab wanted them to adopt the identity. On the other hand, all the neighboring Arabs who hosted the Palestinians, they again, there's not the problem with the conversation. So let's put it as a disclaimer from now on. If I mistakenly say Palestinians or Lebanese, it's just a slip because there's nothing called one idea from one group.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the conversation. So let's say in Lebanon or in Syria or in Jordan or in Egypt, Palestinians are at the same time requested to fight back Israel. They also are armed to help them fight Israel, and at the same time blamed for the destruction that comes from their war with Israel. So when you talk to someone, you could hear one part of the conversation, like let's say the blaming part. Oh, Palestinian caused this country to go bad because of their war with Israel. But okay, but Palestinians didn't have weapons factory or weapons depot. They actually got it from you. You funded them. There's part of the funding, part of the arming. There's agreements. There's the Cairo agreement, which actually everyone approved to give to make Palestinians the face of the struggle. Now, of course, on the other hand, the Palestinian side, the leadership, again, has many different factions, all funded and for one purpose: to do something. And we have points in history where it never ended up like a very good solution, like Arafat just giving an outside example, when he allied with Saddam to invade Kuwait, it backfired on all Palestinians in Kuwait. Now, why did he do that internally? Because his alliance, because he has to do that. but you just did that and sacrificed all the people a reputation with it.
Yeah.
Now maybe it would have been different if Saddam won, but it doesn't mean it would have been correct. But history is written by the victorious. So if they have won, they would have written a different history.
Yeah, imagine so. For you growing up, did you have particular views that have changed on the whole conflict, or did you always see things the way that you currently do?
Okay, well, before I worked with anything political, I spent my whole childhood studying religion. So I'm very well versed in Quran, and I'm very well versed in Arabic grammar and structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to a question: why are we correct? I read the Quran. Actually, it's a beautiful scripture, and I asked this question: why Muslims are correct? And the answer my aunt gave me was simple: read the other books. So she
Wow.
didn't say she didn't say we are correct, we are not correct. She said the next part you have to do is read the other books. And so I did. I did start with the Bible, the Christian Bible. Then I moved to Torah. But then, and that's later on, when technology became more available, that was easier because I started looking specifically for a story without mentioning if I'm looking for it in the Bible or Quran or Torah.
Mm.
So now I started comparing stories, and stories actually align perfectly. Now, this is a very good conversation, but it's why I formed my views. It's because of the religious factor. Because we also, Muslims, most of them, what's called a Muslim nowadays, base their religion on common stuff that's not actually in the book. Most of it, or 90% of it, is derived from the hadith. The hadith is something collected 200 years after the Prophet died, and of course attributed to him,
Mm-hmm.
and it raises a lot of questions. Now it says a prophet said so, but the Quran says otherwise. And if you can prove a lot of, or partial, or even 5 or 10% of it wrong, you have to be doubtful about the whole collection. Also, there's a lot of, and this is, sorry, I'm going to jump to another example, but it is important to me. When you read a Shakespearean sonnet, in which English do you try to understand it?
In which the Old English.
Thank you. In the Old English. I cannot translate it with the English that is common right now. Not the slang, not the new English metaphors, not the new English idioms. It's different. This is why
Mm-hmm.
when you study a sonnet, you have to understand it how it was written with the English. And this is the most common thing, common mistake they do with scripture. So you take a word from the Quran, but you change the meaning. And some people would want to point out to me, let's say, a verse. You go to a popular website, let's say Quran.com or Islam Web or stuff like that. So even their translation is based on the new Arabic. Okay, now you're not being religious, you're being a propagandist. If you read the scripture in the Arabic itself, it says so many different things. Specifically, if I want to sum up the structure of Quran by itself in the language, it simply says the Prophet is a messenger. He's here to preach the Jewish faith to the Arabs. He had 0 miracles. He never pretended to have one. The Quran addresses him as just a messenger. What does it mean, just a messenger? It means just a messenger. It
Mm.
didn't give him any powers. The only miracle by itself was the inspiration, the translation of the commandments to Arab people. And in fact, The Islamic studies collaborate that because Islam is the Arabs were in a very bad shape. They were uh, burying first the child if it was a girl. They were worshipping statuses. So the only thing it was just a messenger. So from there you read things differently. Oh, like okay, so none of these commandments that we heard and practice are true. Another very important factor is some would shame have Quran having wars or stuff. There's another verse that literally says, "It is just the stories we tell you." So we didn't see the Jewish eternalizing the fight with the pharaohs, aka the Egyptians. Now there's a story about the 7 plagues. We also have it, but so you have wars in the Torah, you have wars in the Bible. The only difference is you didn't make it eternal. Oh, those Romans did it 2,000 years ago. We have to go by it. There's also general stuff, and this is also relative to the Arabic. Let's say a verse talking about children of Israel, but there's also a clear verse saying all believers, whether it's children of Israel, whether it's Nasara, the Christian, believers, Jews, followers of the Jews. It puts all of these groups in one sentence, equalizing them as believers, as you can choose what to do. So when you read the scripture in that method, in a direct way, without distraction, it makes a difference. And I actually studied, and sorry, I was a little jerk when it came to studying religion, because I always tried to provoke the scholars. Like they would start saying something, and I would say no, but it says so. It doesn't say so. It doesn't make sense. If someone says, but the Jews are cursed, for example, I would say, wait, so you're telling me my God, the one justice God, have created a portion of population that's predestined to being cursed. So where's the free will? Where's the chance they're giving? That's not a good God.
How was that received? The challenges, was that an acceptable part of the religious study, or not very much
Oh no,
so?
I was kicked out from many
Okay.
I jumped, and then, this is why I said I was like a jerk, because I intentionally started going to other circles to just provoke these questions. To just
Do you feel like you believed in God at the time, or
oh
the
yeah, I
Quran?
definitely did,
Yeah.
and and I still do. I believe in God. I believe you have like it makes. Listen, this is philosophical, but it makes me feel a peace in my heart that yes, if you are a murderer, you're not gonna get away with it. You will be judged in the afterlife. If I was misjudged, it makes me feel that there's gonna be a judgment in the afterlife. On the other part of this religion is also that you can do your own. Like it doesn't have to be specifically called Jewish, Christian, or the whole idea from faith is having one God. You believe it's one God. Now, there's a lot of. I always. This is one of the things I always ask. Also, when speaking about the religion, why do Muslims specifically, for a religion that was sent in Arabic, and even Arabs hardly understand, they want to translate, and they want to translate wrong, and sometimes they translate it in a stupid way, or when they converse with you, they make you feel alienated. Like in the name of Allah, I just translated in the name of Allah. Allah is just the Arabic word for Elohim, for
Yeah.
Dieu, God. But they decided, no, let's keep the Arabic name. It's like a different
Interesting.
God. You
Well, I
could
think
just,
my strongest argument, I would say, in terms of religion or ethics not coming from religion fully. I mean, I'm sure people's religious beliefs do help them maybe form some of the moral groundings that they have. But at the same time, if you look at it, it almost seems to me like nobody fully 100% believes everything that's in those books, because, if you look at, I'll use the Jewish Bible. There was some terrible things in there, like we stone women for, infidelity, right?
No,
We
no,
don't
not
do that
really.
anymore.
Not really. Read it. I
Okay.
actually,
It's
I
been a while.
actually support, I actually support the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran in those stuff because it was never clear as you just said it. It was never like that. There was always very strict conditions. Like it was saying, if you can prove it, and it's impossible to prove it. For example, uh, committing adultery requires 4 live witnesses. But what is adultery? This is the problem when you mistake the concept in the first place. Adultery is without consent. One, that's sorry, without consent that became a rape. But let's say two married people, that's called adultery, and they still have to have 4 witnesses live. Now,
But
there's
what
also
put that in there in the first place if
no,
that's
no,
never practical?
it's not gonna happen. The thing is, you cannot even apply it. But I want to join. It's hard to explain. But the thing is, when you read the text, you can't read like one bylaw. It has to be connected to all other bylaws. By default, in religion, 2 people announcing they are together. By that, they don't need a spiritual person in the text to officiate their marriage or to officiate their relationship. So basically, a boyfriend girlfriend is marriage by religion. Why? Because the number one rule is announcement. Like this announcement, basically in the past, protected these 2 people because their tribes wouldn't let anything happen because they know it's happening. It's an official commitment. So the basic rule back then was announcement. When you consider that, there's no more room left for what's called adultery because all the relationships are by default legal and religious. Do you see how it's not it's like a very impossible situation to actually enforce adultery? Plus, the rules back then came much better than what it was actually being done to people. So it's like, let's soften the rule. It wasn't harsher rule. It was even softer than what it was actually applied.
But it's interesting because if you look through history, so everybody had the same religious texts for a period of time, and yet the morality of society changed, right? It's we treat people in really different ways today than we did yesterday, and
Yet
so it's
there's
not
also
coming
part.
from just
Now
religious
this is
text.
the thing again with the religion. There's also parts where it says you have to confine to follow the common law. Like as a Muslim, for example, if I'm following the Quran and I live in the States, following the law of the state is part of being religious. So if that evolved, it didn't close the door. It didn't make it eternal. It said you have to follow the law. Now, people
So
who come and say, no, I have to revert to that Sharia law or something.
yeah, that's what immediately I was thinking, because okay, so I was just watching, it came up on my YouTube as this preacher, in London, and he's preaching Sharia law and just converting everyone. I'm like, well, if you came into the country, shouldn't you live under the existing law?
Actually, that's his religion. His religion asked him to do that. And if he really, really doesn't feel comfortable, he can safely leave.
Yeah.
It's not like you shouldn't live like, oh, by force, I have to make you live under this. You have to at least give me a choice. So the religion is two-way. It has to come from above and from the personal perspective. Now, as a person, I have a choice. If I follow the law, I follow the law, but I cannot outbound the law like, oh no, a book said so. No, the book first said follow the law. Then, if you didn't like it, try to change it. How do you try to change it? By the legal procedures. If you cannot do that, you can leave.
But it's interesting because I think that a lot of times you see people, there's so many interpretations of the same text, regardless, like Christianity, Judaism, Islam. I mean, you have different people interpreting it in such different ways. Even like oh my gosh, you're I'm blanking the book that all the anti-Semites always like to cite, the Talmud, where it's basically like scholars arguing over, right? There is like, it's hard to find a consensus. So then it's like
But it is a debate by itself. The Talmud is a debate by itself.
exactly. It's funny because all the
it's not a law.
It's
a
it's
debate
really funny
above the
because
law.
it's being represented as some kind of a book, a religious book that all Jews read. And obviously, a lot of Jews have never read it. And two, it's like, it's something where it's like, it's a dialogue, it's a debate, and it's a philosophical exploration. But
yeah, the difference is with many Muslims, there's a few common interpretations that isn't from the book, but just became laws. So people follow them, do them, and if you confront them, they would stumble. Like, where did you read that from? Explain it. Just ask that. They wouldn't get an actual answer. Although they will defend it. They will defend it for, like this guy. I think you're talking either about Daniel Hakikatu or the other one.
there's a lot of them.
Yeah, no, I seen them a lot on social media recently. Maybe you're talking about them. They quote a lot about Talmud said so, Talmud said so, and other people. You can easily find amazing, controversial, impossible things when you read about the Islamic stuff from Hadith, from fatwas, from declarations like that. And this is why I don't believe any of that. My law is the civil law. My belief is having one God. It's quite simple. And if I didn't like what I read directly in the books, I wouldn't defend them. But nothing in the books override your personal freedom. Nothing. But
That's how I feel.
yeah, but no one applies it. So that's the problem. You, like I said, you cannot I've talked about this many times so far. Everyone would defend like martyrdom and stuff like that, and it's in the book. It's not. It's like I bet anyone right now who would listen to this or in the future to find the word in the Quran. It's only mentioned in the context. The word shaheed, which you probably heard, doesn't mean martyr. In fact, there are specific verses which says, "Wallahu shahid." God is shahid. God is witness. It's from the verb shahada, which is so. So it's witness. Now, everyone who speaks Arabic, if you ask him what's a shaheed, he would say the dead person or the martyr. Okay, how did we change that meaning? When was it changed? I tried to trace it back online. I could only trace it back 100, 150 years ago, that switch, but everyone right now believe it. So
Right.
I'm just saying, this is a very simple example. It's not in the text, it's not in the verse, but suddenly everyone who speaks Arabic believes shaheed means martyr. This is a very crucial word.
How much do you think, like the conflicts that we see today, so Israel, Palestine, in terms of the conflicts within different countries, where let's say the UK, how much of that do you think is rooted in religion?
Right now, a lot, because that's the common factor, realistically. And I think one way of fixing that is like there's two ways actually. In a conversation with Yasmin Muhammad, she mentioned the way like we should be fixed with removing the leadership, which is 100% true. It should be done. Proof of case in point, what UAE did, what Saudi Arabia is trying to do. When you remove the pre-written script for the imams to say and repeat, you open the door for critical thinking. Another way I would say, read your book. Why do you believe someone who says it's in the book and you defend it? Go read your book. That's another way to go into the religion. So you can either go upwards and say it's hateful religion and try to do that. It's not going to help every time, because some people just defend stuff with instinct without even trying to argue it. But in reality, if they actually dive in their own text, which is basis for their argument, they might convince themselves. This reminds me of a sketch. I'll share it with you from Adam Ruins Everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He describes, and I looked into it. It's actually a real psychological theory. Sometimes when you confront someone with the truth, contrary to what he believes, it imitates a physical punch into him. He feels the same pain he gets from a physical punch. So it's very interesting. Like when you address someone contradicting your views, if you do it that way, they're gonna jump into defense. It's better maybe to get them to reach that conclusion, assumably on their own.
But you have imams who are reading these texts, and yet the conclusions that they're arriving at are different from the conclusions that some other people are arriving at. So, like, what accounts for that more radical lens that some of them have?
I think it's intentional. So if you review in the past centuries, you'll find always religion was a very good tool to manipulate people, to recruit armies, to give them a sense of higher cause recruitment and do something. And most of the people just follow blindly, like they need a leader. That's also natural. Now, if that leader is bad, he can manipulate one or two concepts. He can be good at like most of the concepts, but then he only has to slip one or two ideologies he created. So by default, I believe that guy. Then when he does something bad, I still believe him.
So you think they are fully aware, as opposed to that they're
Most
doing this? You
definitely.
think so? Okay.
Definitely.
Because I've seen people, convince themselves of all sorts of things, and we're reading the same texts, and I believe they believe it. I believe they've talked themselves into believing it, and I think it's not necessarily coming from, it's when people want to believe a certain thing. I've just witnessed it in so many cases outside of religion, where we could be looking at the exact same set of facts, and their brains just process it completely differently.
Exactly. I don't know how to do it. So this is not just with religion. You can see we pretend it's the highest advanced year of all ages. We pretend information at everyone's hands, but we cannot agree on simple facts sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, some people would argue me, okay, but who defines the fact? Who defines the logic? Well, what about science? Didn't we agree that science is a good principle? Shouldn't we have to apply it on?
But science can always change, right? The scientific method. I mean, that would be the argument.
Yeah, but it didn't change. Like it denied all the principles.
No, and also there are things that we can verify. I mean, we can say this particular event happened on this year, and we have records of things. So, when you're when you're discussing history, while there is room for interpretation, if you have archaeological evidence, if you have, multiple sources saying the same thing, the likelihood of that being wrong is pretty small. Um, so, and yet you have people who, see, I don't even think it's because they interpret it differently. I think they only expose themselves to
One truth.
specific things.
I used to believe in a different truth. So in my case, the the push for peace isn't based on that I changed my perspective of history first. No, that came later. And right now, I don't actually debate someone. Like, you could tell me the history from Israeli side, from Palestinian side. I don't argue much. I could add input. I would add everything. I would say, from what I know, from my parents' information, from my grandparent information, I would phrase it like that. But I don't really argue history. Case in point, what's happening now? Something is happening before our eyes, and we're arguing what is it? And some people say no, and I can see a lot of let's say social media influencers, legacy media would take any video and change the title, and it becomes truth. And other people just take it and say, here, it's documented. But that guy who documented it, it's just a person. Sometimes forget about the other stuff. I've seen influencers would argue stuff I personally lived. Okay, I don't have their voice, I don't have their influence. And even if I did, we'll still have people who believe me, and we'll still have people who believe him. Right? So the summary of this idea I'm trying to say is I tell people you have two options. You either believe in law or religion. Both of them do not allow you to judge by the sins of the father. Right? So
Yeah.
if I want to go back and assume the Arabs killed Israelis, the Israelis killed the Arabs, and argue who started that specific incident, what do I want to try to prove? If I proved your father, sorry for the example, but if I proved your father was part of a massacre, of being a perpetrator, what do I get? What can I do? Nothing, right? So why did I do it? So part of the reason I advocate like things should happen today, stop. We have to coexist because people exist. We exist, period. If you want to throw people in the sea either side, it's not going to happen. I wouldn't advocate it to happen. I wouldn't want it to happen. And I wish people would stop asking for it to happen.
Yeah, I share a similar view, and I look at it in terms of, and I've written about this before, where, even going to, I traveled to Austria years ago, and it actually hit me a little harder than I expected. And I spent time in Hungary, also has, terrible past in terms of, the Holocaust. And sometimes I'd see older people and I couldn't help but wonder, what they thought, what they did, at that time, if they were alive. But in general, when I looked at it in the context of these people today, I don't hold, somebody's father or grandfather or great grandfather responsible for those things. I look at that person today and I look at, okay, what does this person think today? What do they want? How do they behave? And I think you can only look at it that way. So you're right in the sense that we focus so much on arguing history. And, look, in the context of the Middle East, I know there are bad things that were done by Israelis. I know there are very bad things that were also done by Palestinians, but we're going to go back and forth. And it ultimately doesn't matter to today, because today
and we
we have,
also know,
yeah.
I know for a fact, and this is the again personal story from my grandfather, other from the stories of they took the land, they fought. They told me some people were in very much harmony, that they willingly trusted their, let's say, they had to leave because they told them the Jews are coming, the Zionists. Some
Mhm.
people willingly gave their property for Jewish because of trust.
Mhm.
So again, there's no one story. If there's multiple truth, it's okay to believe in multiple truth.
And I think there was a multiple, like if I look at it, it seems to me that some people definitely left because of what they were told.
Yeah.
Some people might have thought they could return, some people maybe not. And I think there were also actions on behalf on the Israeli side where they probably, or I think it's pretty documented that there were certain attacks and things like that. So I
But,
mean, no, go
sorry.
ahead. No, it's okay.
Well, I just want to say, because there's nothing called blanket immunity because of your what you're born. I cannot be born a good person. I cannot be born a bad person. So there's always good and bad people everywhere. That's simple. So
Yeah.
I can take, and this is what they're doing even today. Today, I can easily, I don't do that, and I'm going to tell you why. You can easily take, if I want to go against Israel, I can easily give you videos, proven incidents happening today, and I go against the whole population. It doesn't make sense. And this is why I do the other side. I do our side. What's I hate to have to be on one side anyway. As I said, I just want to be a person, a human.
Yeah.
So, but since I'm my adjective is Palestinian, so I try to do okay. So if Hamas doesn't represent themselves and they represent part of the population, which is true, what about the other part that they do not represent? Do you want to sum everyone in one basket? What did I ever do to you?
And that's been my argument where people do sometimes, because they're mad or upset or scared, they will say things like, oh, they're all the some people will say things like all the Palestinians, they all support, Hamas. And I'm like, well, look, I know at least several people who are not like that, who are very courageous in speaking, and they have families and they have friends. And I imagine those friends and families are not like that. And also, I think about it in the context of if you're growing up and you're really indoctrinated for a very long period of time and you're not exposed to a lot of other ideas, even somebody who's not like a bad person is going to sometimes have thinking that doesn't align with being great to other people,
Yeah.
and so if they have a chance to have a different a more open, because you see a lot of people who've maybe not a lot but enough people that I've seen where they grew up in very oppressive regimes where they were indoctrinated, and then they had a chance to discover something else and they've completely transformed as human beings. They're very pro peace, and you see that, and that happens also with, like, I remember KKK member, right? Or he was a very active guy, and I remember watching this guy on TV. Now he gets people out. So is it a huge group of people? I don't know. And that's where I'm like, I think it's hard to know what's actually going on the ground or what people think on the ground because that's not really represented.
It is. It is. So now let's close the religion page,
Mhm.
because now we're going to talk a little politics.
Yeah.
And about this specific point, it's one of 2 points I try to advocate for: communication and right of return. First, for communication, there's a ban on communication. So there's one part that actually would prosecute you for having communication. And this is actually part of my story, my personal story, because advocacy wise, maybe one time in 2014, it was World Cup. I wrote an article about Palestine and Israel having to fight their war on a football field, like to have a civil competition. For that, that was my first, it wasn't prison, but I was called in, disciplined, and asked to remove that. And I did. A second time was unintentional. Before starting to write, I had speaking of Austria, I was in Austria on official business for a branch of the Lebanese government for the casino, a gaming part. And one of the companies I was meeting with, the official is Israeli, not official, the executive is Israeli. And he texted me, "Where are you?" And I didn't even know that. I didn't even notice like the number or anything. And that's relevant to the next, because later on I was someone wanted to make me a collaborator, and by law in Lebanon, having a number message you can be enough incrimination against you to be called for quite a long time just for interrogation. And because of that, a lot of other stuff happened. Specifically, I learned a lot about details of the law. I used to think that collaboration means active military, like intelligence against someone, so you get thrown in jail. Technically, the law is amazingly
flexible.
brutal.
Oh yeah,
Very brutal. It says if I even work with a company that has ties or has someone in Israel or official in Israel or director in Israel, or so any tie you describe it. And through that, the hole that was digged for me, there was other numbers, 972 numbers, but the other numbers weren't for Israelis. They were for Palestinians in the West Bank having 972 number, Arab names. But can I prove it? I literally, and this is something this is probably the first time I say it to anyone ever. Maybe just because it didn't pass, but actually I realized then they don't only have a log of your communication, they have transcripts of communication. They literally presented me, this was part of my interrogation, a booklet this thick about conversation transcripts about what I was saying. So, of course, I had nothing to fear. It was all about either relative, friends, business, but I wasn't allowed to even do that.
But it's like you can't even speak. So if you live in a society where you can't speak, I mean, that's what part of why I'm so involved in freedom of speech, even in the West, where, I mean, I think we have a tremendous amount of speech in comparison to some other places. But I always look at it like we could always end up in the same boat. And if you can't speak to other people about what you believe, then you don't know what anybody else around you believes. You might all believe the same thing and think your government is this tyrannical force, and maybe you love the Jews,
And I therefore could believe anything they tell me about you.
That's right.
This is why I said communication is the first problem I think must be solved. If we don't have communication, we would believe any atrocity, anything that was told on our behalf, because we don't talk. Now, also, people sometimes are two-faced. Let's say on social media, they could come on your feed and say, "I want to kill you," but will they do that face to face?
Mostly not.
Mostly not. They wouldn't.
Yeah.
So this stuff, when I notice it, maybe I did it in my life before, maybe I haven't. But once I notice it, I teach myself to practice it. Like anytime I'm writing something, I try to be prepared to write it and be able to say it. Same thing. If I believe I can't say it, I try not to write it. Unless,
I'm the
as
same
I
way.
said, a human, I could make a mistake. But I try not to do that mistake. But most people don't care, especially with anonymous names. They are like carte blanche to say anything they want.
Yeah. You mentioned that you've since the war in Gaza and the October 7th attacks, you have talked to some people that you know in
All
Gaza.
friends I was disconnected from, yes.
Yeah. So what are you able to share anything in terms of what they're thinking, what they're feeling on the ground?
Actually, three groups. There was, before that, there was people defending Hamas, blessed what they did,
Mm.
approved what they did. And there were people who directly were like what I personally said at the time, oh shit, they screwed us, they're gonna cause us that, they're gonna cause this. That group existed. Now there's a third group, people who were from Hamas who are dissidents.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't confirm it. I think there might be a fourth group who are now supporting Hamas, which is possible, but not from the personal group I know.
Right.
But it is possible, like some people would get, because if you get, and I understand that specific part sometimes, when you get someone very close to you lost, your kid, your father, your brother, everything is predictable. And those specific people, and I have, let's say, I do a lot of translations sometimes or post it. Those specific groups who I know they just lost someone, I don't post it because it's,
I can
I don't know.
understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know their state of mind and everything. To me, I actually justify it. Like whatever you say right now is okay. I don't want people to judge them based on that.
Yeah, because I've seen some people who have been incredible despite having this loss, and we're still advocating for peace. And that's remarkable. I don't think we can predict how we would feel, in
Yeah.
that moment. So I
But
also,
after a while passes, that's a different conversation. Like whether I lost someone or didn't, at the minute of it happening is different from when I take my grieving period.
yeah,
Like
because
I,
it's quite different. Like if I go, oh my God, somebody killed my family and I'm really upset, and then I go and later on decide to kill other people, that's a really different situation than that.
there's there's I'm not gonna share it, but there's a video that went viral on the Resistance channel. I have the rest of it. I didn't even try to refute it, about a little girl. She looks around 10. She's crying, very, very emotional part. She lost her brother and she was crying and judging, and Al Jazeera, of course, posted it and everyone did. And I assumed that was the video. Then today I saw the full video. At the end of it, which they cut from the legacy media, she actually says, uh, screw the Jews, screw Hamas, screw everyone. They cut that part.
Mm,
Now, if it was me, I would post it, all of it, if
yep.
I had to post it, or none of it. Because you can't be a hypocrite. You either want to deliver her voice unfiltered or don't. If you
I
cut
agree.
part of it, just the part that she's crying, you're just abusing her situation to gain sympathy and to try, you know,
Well,
to,
I've seen that a lot in general doing this. I think this is probably the most kind of documented on social media war that I've ever seen, where it's interesting because sometimes I'll see fake videos or from a different place, from different war,
from
and I
Syria. So
and I
from
wonder why.
Syria, well, because what happened in Syria is way beyond any imagination. Literally, that puts Gaza war to a fraction of what
Well,
happened.
you just would think that, given that, we can debate how many deaths and we don't know, but like, there are deaths, right? There are children dying, there are women, men, whatever. I mean, there are definitely people dying. So I don't quite understand the need to have to take it from a different war in order to sell this narrative. And yet they're doing it because I guess it's to flood the feeds with these images.
Yes, because there's more documentation from Syria than there is in Gaza. Because in Gaza, right now, the media is controlled. People would say, "Oh, you're free to post anything." No, you're not. Even single people who have phones and can transport images are very careful about what they do. Because now people would say, okay, why don't they, even if they are dissidents? Because you can't protect them, so don't ask them for stuff.
Mhm.
They
So they are Hamas doesn't want those images
no,
posted.
no. Even if you're live on Al Jazeera or someone did, and they appear to be saying something out of the script, they are directly pushed away or feed changed.
Yeah.
Nothing broadcasted live. If these people, specifically Al Jazeera press or others, actually there's only Al Jazeera press working right now. If they actually wanted to transport voices, why don't they do unfiltered live broadcast? And I honestly, I'm gonna say it now. If they are supporting Hamas, I won't agree, but we'll no. We'll just say, yeah, okay, they are doing that.
Mm.
But when I'm saying I have evidence, contrary to what you're saying, I have evidence of many people where people say, no, Palestinians are with Hamas. So you're happy to describe, and specifically the axis of resistance. So that you want us to be all Hamas, then you want us to cry. Uh, which is it? And also, we're also victorious, but we're also under ethnic cleansing. Which is it?
No, genocide, right?
Yeah,
Um,
genocide, ethnic cleansing, but at the same time, we're victorious. It doesn't make sense.
no, I get that those contradictory claims a lot. It's this whole genocide thing, which has been weaponized in this. Because look, I think if somebody has a basis to criticize Israeli military actions, that's fine. Um, I think we don't know enough on the ground, most of us, or have military knowledge to really assess that situation in really clear terms. But the word genocide, has such a specific definition. And yet I feel it's been hijacked. And we've seen a lot of different words over the last, X number of years where they're redefined completely and only applied in these one situation. And then it's very easy to then say, well, you support genocide, right? I don't
Yeah,
support genocide. Not at all. Quite the
yeah. And
opposite.
there's also more requirement for people like me to actually criticize IDF and do that. I'm possibly one of very few who don't care about that requirement. Why? Not because I don't believe, oh, IDF are prophets and can't do anything wrong. No, I know they do.
Mhm.
But why does it bother you when I criticize our side? Where no, if I talk about our side, it's not the time. It's not, I have to show constant like support to resistance, but I don't want to. I don't feel that. Two, if I criticize the others in our groups, no, but you're not criticizing Israel enough. But again, we it's to me it's like the glass house theory. If I don't fix my house, I don't have time to criticize you. I know you have faults, but again, I rely on people, on my counterpart, which they are there, and publicly we can see a lot of Israelis criticizing their Israeli policy. So thank you. That position is filled. I
Yes.
don't have to fill it too. But how many people are working on criticizing our own political bullshit? Not
And I
much.
No, and I feel the same way when it comes to, when I started being more, I don't even, I don't think of myself as a political commentator, but in some ways, I suppose I have put my feet into that fire. And I always, when I started, I was criticizing the left because, that was my group, right? So I felt the same way, pretty much in the same exact language, clean up your house first, right? I've become a little more proactively critical of people on the right these days, but that's because like on an X, I just see so much of it; it's hard not to.
Yeah,
So
this is oh, you can't criticize them, but who do you like? Do we have to always be just two groups and criticize internally and publicly pretend everything is
no,
shiny?
and also if you don't criticize internally, at least internally, but should be public, because then you never have any kind of change, and you also never see anybody criticize, right? So if you never see anybody criticizing a particular side, then you think that everyone on that side agrees. And what I've learned very quickly is that most people don't agree with these things that I've been criticizing, right? They actually don't. They're just really scared to speak up.
Yeah.
And same here in this situation. I think a lot of people are really scared to voice an opinion. A lot of people almost intentionally probably stay away from learning much about the conflict so they don't have to take a position. Which, you know, whatever. Right? People have their rights. I understand it's not pleasant, but and I think you're right in that. You know, I've even noticed, here I am qualifying. Hey, you know, I'm sure the Israelis are doing bad things too, and this, I felt like I needed to put in this caveat. But I also feel, you know, I don't want it to be so one-sided. I want people to see that I can acknowledge that it's not always so black and white. And at the same time, I don't think the two sides are equivalent. You know, I don't think
Yeah.
the IDF is as bad as Hamas, not even in the same league. I just don't. So when people say, why aren't you criticizing, why aren't you talking about the children that are dying in Gaza? It's like, not because I don't care about the children that are dying in Gaza. I care very much, but it's because I don't think the two situations are equivalent. So me saying is what, it's just virtue signaling. Unless I have a particular instance where I know there was like actual wrongdoing, as opposed to a very complex environment on the ground where it's a very difficult battle to fight, and people unfortunately do end up as casualties. And I believe not intentionally. I think while there are certainly some mistakes that get made, some people, like, you know, people are not, there's really bad people out there too, right? Some of those bad people are in the IDF. I don't think it's the vast
Definitely.
majority, but
Everywhere.
they're
It's always.
everywhere. Exactly. So I mean, I don't make an exception. I'm not like, oh my god, everybody in the IDF is perfect, is all, you know, because they're Jewish or something like that, which would be
No,
Jewish
this is
supremacy.
the distinction. This is the distinction. Like, I can agree uh, there's gonna be a bad people in the IDF, but I personally believe it completely. Like, there's no intention to ethnically cleanse,
Yeah.
because, and this is important again, because I lived in different places, and I draw comparison in my mind all the time. It's similar to whataboutism, but in my mind, it's really about, yeah. But when you, let's say, Catherine, define a principle, do you apply it based on religion, ethnicity, or on humans? If it's about Israeli ethnically cleansing Palestinians, what do you would call what happened in Syria for Palestinians? Most people don't know about
What would I call it? I mean, closer to
it.
a genocide.
Cleansing,
Yeah.
or we're considered same ethnic group, so it's okay.
It's not okay. It doesn't make it different.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
small incident, and again, not politically correct. Most people don't like to draw comparisons, but it, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years, there was an incident in a northern camp of Palestinians in the north of Lebanon. So the terrorists were from groups came from Syria, and they had the Lebanese military army had to go in to take them out. And by the way, this is also, oh, actually, it's more, because I was, yeah, I that's another secret, but doesn't matter anymore. But because at the time I was still working with PA, the authority, the embassy in Lebanon. So there was coordination between the Palestinian factions and the Lebanese army to go take them out. But during that operation, a little less than 1,000 people died to take out less than 10. Okay. Now, of course, you would say, oh, the number is just 1,000. It's 1,000. It's not a small number.
Yeah.
But this was never discussed the same way we discussed how operation happening in Gaza. Now,
No.
again, if I don't have to say this out loud, but for the sake of the recording, to me, one life is too many, period. But when others are trying to be politically analysts and think tanks and try to tell me this is okay, this is not. We have 100. Yarmouk camp in Syria is 120,000 Palestinians. After the war, it's 20,000. I'm not saying the 100,000 is dead. I'm saying we don't have a clue. Some fled, some died, some disappeared, some no idea what you call that. Also, if we want to be actually talking about ethnically cleansing, aren't we actually from the same races technically, except for religion? Mostly, yes. We have to
We're
be
related.
but we have to be related, DNA, stuff like that. Although, again, I personally hate all this talk about DNA and stuff because what does it make you? Better, less?
No,
Even
I personally don't feel like it makes a difference in terms of better or less. I think, I guess I have a little bit more of a
belonging?
connection to culture. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's the
Okay.
cultural aspect of
So
it.
when it comes to the connection, there's other examples which makes me angry about this theory. I understand some people honestly believe it, like it's a good, honest connection. But are you only trying to connect to the good parts of that culture? Like if you're Romanian,
Yeah.
Roman, uh, you want to connect to the good Roman history or the bad Roman history? Or
Yeah,
you
of
would say,
course you're
I'm
going to want
Roman.
to connect to the good stuff, of course. But I think
So
you have
why
to
do you do it?
acknowledge yeah. No, it's interesting. I was going to make a video about this actually, because
On the other hand, as I said, it's okay to actually relate to something in the past, to be like, definitely, I'm not saying, oh, you can't be ancient Jewish or relate to the culture and keep it, or ancient Arab, or ancient Phoenician, or ancient Pharaoh. I don't, it's okay to do that. But all I'm saying is some people who do it makes me irritated because I know they do it for themselves, but they criticize the other. For example, when we talk about ethnic groups, and this is very interesting because you maybe heard it from only one or two groups. If we go to the Jewish, the Israelis,
Mhm.
uh, some of them again, because I'm from in this conversation, I'm going to be talking about part of each. Would say, oh, we're original Jewish, you're Arabs, but there's no proof all Palestinians are Arabs. If you want to be a genetic stuff, because they could be just converts. Now, this is the conversation when you look at it summed in just those two groups. Did you ever listen it to from the other side? What about the Syrians? Syrians would say you were from the Syrian dynasty.
Mm.
So us, you, them, everyone is Syrian. That's another view. Another would take Lebanese perspective. Oh, we're Phoenician, but and Israel is Jewish, and in between the Palestinians are Arabs. It doesn't make sense. So if you want to go backwards, so we must automatically, by the same principle, we're Canaanites or stuff like that. My conclusion is, if you want to connect to take the good values, bravo. I I like it. I respect it. But if you want to connect to believe you're different, and I only can conclude that when I see you treating the other group. I won't conclude it just because you say, I am Jewish. I will conclude it when you say, I am Jewish, but the Phoenician are bad. No, you both
Right.
had good history, bad history, so
No, no,
let's.
and I'd never do that, but I would feel like, I guess for me, it's almost like a little bit of selfish as to why I enjoy cultures. So I choose to live in a place that's really mixed and, it's different. But I like when I travel, I get to go to Japan and there's Japanese people with their culture. And if I went to Morocco and Moroccan cultures. So I find it really interesting, and there's something about humans where they will find ways to separate. I ran a thought experiment once upon a time. I said, okay, let's assume we all look exactly the same, sound the same, everything about, and we're dressed the same. How do you envision, that we're now this one group? There's not really a distinction that's
Yeah,
physical, and people still found ways to separate into
yeah,
groups.
they always do. Even when you dive in, you start with a country, then you go to sects, could be religious, could be political, then you go to tribes, then you could go to family and family cousins, and those
Yeah.
cousins from each side. People always manage to try to draw a distinguish.
And the point is like you said, it's like how do you does it affect how you treat other people? You can have your tribe or whatever. I think the key is, do you then think that you're better than other people? Do you then
Yeah,
treat other people in more negative ways? Do you isolate completely from other people? I don't think that's a very good thing. Now, again, I can understand wanting to protect a culture. Like I said, Japanese culture is also not very far from perfect. I focus on the fun things
yeah,
that I like. I mean, they have some horrible things too, and a history that's not necessarily all that great. But in today's Japan, because I look at today, I enjoy going there and having this Japanese culture. Their immigration policy is extremely, extremely restrictive, but I don't have like, because I understand that if it wasn't, all these really specific things about their culture would eventually disappear. And maybe that's okay. I don't really know. I think it's just, like I said, it's a little bit selfish because I want to go to
we're
Japan and
reaching
enjoy
the
that.
same conclusion. We're reaching the same conclusion. So I love when people connect back uh, to make it feel precious, to use the good qualities and whatever they need. I only conclude otherwise after they actually try to attack another group or make it sound different.
No,
That's when I say,
and that's why I believe in individualism. So even if you have a group or a culture, I can look at, okay, make some assessment of that, but ultimately I will judge every person as their own individual. That's the only way I know how to do it, because, well, just because somebody's part of one culture or one, nationality, or they live in a particular place, I don't know what they think. That doesn't mean they think the same thing as everyone else. So I would never
exactly.
assume that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Some other notice about the hypocrisy, similar to ethnicity or connection. Some people would say, again, because of my situation, I'm giving the example of Palestinians. All Palestinians are X, but drawing a conclusion on the Iranian, or Iranian are different from the regime.
Mm.
No, you either are, you make a generalization about all, and you believe that once the government is set, it represents everyone, or you still believe that people believe in a choice.
Well,
But here,
I've sort of done that with Iranians, but only because I know that Iranians were polled, and
I
80%.
definitely, from my perspective, I definitely believe that most of the Iranians don't want the regime. I believe that. Same
Mhm.
for Lebanese, Syrians, others. And sorry, finish your point because I want to draw a conclusion with that.
Yeah,
With the
no,
U.S.
that was it. I was basically, I because I know the statistics confirm this, right? I didn't arrive at it from an intuition. I arrived at it because there's actually examples, and there's a lot of Iranian expats who are speaking up, and there's Iranians who are protesting and risking their lives. So that kind of gives me a sense of, okay, clearly a lot of Iranians are not with the regime. In other circumstances, it's harder to know. Like with Palestinians, like, I really have a hard time knowing. I see some people speak out, so I know it's not everybody. I also know it's hard to speak out, so I assume that there are people who might feel this way but cannot speak out, or their voices aren't getting represented. So that makes
Yeah,
it difficult for me to look at, say, Gaza.
it's because of the diaspora work, which Iranians do better.
Hmm.
The Iranian diaspora try to represent the other group and break that barrier. They also, if an Iranian was still in Iran, you can see there's prosecutions, executions, stuff like that. They cannot openly express themselves. But the diaspora does this work for them.
Yeah.
With our case, with others in the region, in the Levant, they are more afraid. And this is something I also can testify from a personal connection. Once you do that, you're losing everyone. Some out of fear, some just want to be disconnected, and some actually on the other side are like, no, you're traitor for expressing your opinion. And this is where I want to draw the comparison. You spoke about the left and the right. Whether you criticize them, get some hate, cancellation online, or whatever, no one, technically in general, coming after you to kill you, except rare cases.
Yeah.
But when it's happening in our region, there's actual life threat. You will get prosecuted. You will get your business lost. You will get you will have something, a form of discipline, a form of telling you to stay in your place. So it actually affects your livelihood directly. So people are afraid, and sometimes it affects your family. So you have to consider, okay, but my family don't want this fight. I can't put them in this fight. So you back off. There's a lot, and also because we're social creatures, most of people bend to that. Maybe like there's so many people, they are rare, but because so many people, we all had some experience that gave us that thick, oh, okay, it's no longer. I was one of them. I will not pretend. I wasn't, as I said, I was disciplined once, and I did stay in my place.
Mm.
I didn't do it. But I also was, when I worked, I got successful with my business. I made a lot of money. I made a lot of businesses. And when I actually chose that time to speak out, and we're talking about 2018, I actually lost everything. All was connected into that big uh, treason case. Then, you know, uh, everyone want to take a bite. Most of the people I worked with who heard I was arrested for treason automatically disconnected business with me.
Well, and I think the big difference too, because the cancel culture aspect that we see in the West is, you can certainly lose your job or your friendships, but it's not the government coming after you. And I think that's
Yeah.
a pretty significant distinction. It's people, it's your tribe or whatnot, but it's not the government. For the most part, I know there are some laws that are being written.
Yeah, something it is. I think the cancel culture is still scary because it's not always based on fact. Sometimes it's just someone spread a rumor. Someone would, let's say, allegedly raped someone, and we still didn't get any information on the case. He's done.
Yeah, I
I'm not saying
in the book that I wrote.
yeah, if he has some evidence, fine, prejudge him. But sometimes I've seen some cases which happen based on simple claim.
Yeah,
Same thing with the treason. Yeah,
one of the
uh,
people in my book was literally is an example of such a case where
yeah. I hate
somebody
to
like,
say this. I
yeah.
hate to say this, but rape allegation isn't automatic cancellation in the East.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
I,
you
I know a lot of cases. Some popular people, scholars, like high levels officials, got cases like this. Eventually, they were dismissed because we never know what happened. Some of them were convicted and still in position.
Yeah, this is kind of similar to the Soviet Union, where I think it's like, oh, it's the woman. She wanted this, and now she's blaming, or that kind of thinking is pretty common as well. I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but back then, that's
Yeah, but
definitely something.
God forbid they do communication or collaboration.
Yeah, well,
That's worse.
yes, for
So just
much.
to add to that political point, because when I told you I also care about mostly communication for because it breaks barriers, and
Mhm.
I also talked about the right of return, especially since the last year no one mentioned it, although it was a critical factor in breaking in not applying Oslo Accords or other stuff, and still right now everyone who mentions peace they they're gonna face this big obstacle called uh, right of return. What I My message to that is no one is actually tackling that because everyone is scared of the UN numbers, and now it's a proper time because now when they see UN numbers aren't actually correct, and which I also can prove because since 20 years ago, uh, I started noticing this. That was one part where, when I was working in the embassy, there was a census for people who were actually in the camps, and
Mhm.
there was a census by UN, there was a census by USAID as a separate organization. So the USAID did their census, they got the lowest number of 300 people versus 750 with the UN. So, and so what I want to say is when people actually do a correct census, remove the people like, let's say my family has at least 20 people registered, none of them are there, but
Mhm.
we are registered with the UNRWA, you'll find the numbers are much lower. And maybe when we get to a full conclusion, instead of 2 million people, we can get a quarter million. That quarter million doesn't really need uh, it not doesn't need. One, they must be given a choice. This
Mhm.
is what I believe. I believe people must be given a choice. Do they want to go back, or would prefer a facilitated immigration as a choice, not obligatory? If we
Right.
do that obligatory for everyone, that's called displacement. For the other group who wants to stay, and even if we assume 90% of them want to stay, we're talking now about 200,000, not 2 million.
Yeah, that number does change things significantly, because I think when we're
Exactly.
talking about millions, then it's
Yeah,
an
it no
automatic
longer
no.
no longer scares Israel or Palestinian Authority in West Bank or in Gaza to say either it's crowded or we can't fit them or ethnically gonna
Mhm.
change the equation.
Would
It's
they go into, would they go, like, where would they go? Like, just building new housing? Or, because I know some of them have, the keys to their door or
yeah, but
something like.
that's symbolic. We
Yeah.
don't really have one. We
Okay.
had one. It
So
was
that's not
symbolic,
a real
but
one.
we no longer know where the house is or what happened.
Right.
But we're talking about new structures. I mean, in China, you can fit 200 in one building. 200,000. I'm kidding, but kind of. I mean, like settlements, like stuff, you can always build a town that can take this number.
Yeah, I think
I,
250,000, and which it might not even, if the full numbers to 50, and some people might choose not to immigrate. I mean, that does completely change that question. I think the way it's generally
definitely.
represented as millions, which, look, from the Israeli point of view, really it's the Jewish point of view in this particular instance. It's like they want to be able to have protection, right? It's a security issue.
Understood. I'm
Mhm.
not saying they have to do it. I'm just saying, in theory, and when I give Israel, I say it because it's technically the worst scenario for Israel to have them back. I'm saying, even in the worst scenario, the number is still different.
Yeah.
Now, why do we have to stick for the worst scenario? I just said there could be settlements in the West Bank, there could be immigration option, there could be stuff like that. Uh, because we know for a fact. Uh, oh, by the way, and this is gonna sound different. So these countries right now that won't accept to give them naturalization, because of the Palestinian cause, right
Mhm.
now they're doing it because they got paid for it, because they get paid per head per person happening to be Palestinian. Now, when you take that bullet out of the chamber, there's also a possibility they gonna offer passports.
Yeah.
They might say, okay, why don't we give them nationality and take $100,000 or $200,000 for
And I
basically.
think,
And this is also important information. I
yeah.
threw the number not by mistake, because right now, as much as these governments would say we will not naturalize Palestinians to protect them, you can still buy it. So it's a principle for sale. It's not a principle.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I also wonder because some Palestinian refugees or that have refugee status. I mean, some, for example, some that live in America or in Canada. I mean, they also have Canadian and American citizenship. And I quite doubt that they're really going to want because they have some of them are very successful here. So I doubt that they're going to want to pick up and and
No,
leave.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, it was a previous rumors. For example, I remember in the 90s, and after that, everyone said, "Hey, make sure you register your kids, your everyone, because there's gonna be reparations."
Hmm.
So I think now, after a while, I think this. I think they kept giving us the illusion of reparation to be registered, but they actually use our numbers and names for their own benefit. And we're always, under the promise and delusion. Do it, you get reparation. So I do it. I register myself. I register my kids. But I didn't know. This is what I think now. I didn't think that back then. I think they just needed a confirmation of numbers, including, as I said, like most of my family are actually all around. There's in Germany, UK, or Australia, uh, even here in America. So we only had few members back there, but everyone was registered in the UN, even
Mm.
their kids. Because, as I said, because they requested us to be registered, they asked for our names, family, uncles, cousins, everyone. So that number, they used it internationally to get what they want. And we, to give us incentive to do it, they told us you're going to get paid. So we did it.
Hmm. Understandable. In terms of, um, I'm trying to think of now. Okay, this is my big question to you: is what do you think can bring about peace now to that region? But more so, I guess my question is, what do Palestinians want? Like, obviously not the extremists because we can't find a resolution there, but the average Palestinian maybe doesn't love Israel, but doesn't necessarily want this to continue forever. Like, what is it that they would be happy with?
Most people inherently want peace. But when you take their livelihood, their money, their earnings, their stuff, and you blame it on someone, it's like a little joke I always repeat. I don't know if it was Mark Twain or someone. Find someone to blame, no problem. So in our culture, someone to blame is Israel. As long as that exists, people can change. People, as long as you give them equal rights. So I don't want to fight. If I had equal rights, like let's say if I those people living in United Arab Emirates, they have zero incentive to fight. What they have from their government is enough. Now, how do you fix it in our region? Something very very important to say. I have to say this joke to understand the culture. Uh, American French or American European Arab were standing together. The American president said, "Look, we did this bridge for 4 million, sold it to the people for 5. so they skimmed 1 million. The European left did it for 3, skimmed 2 million. Like there's more corruption. That's the indication. In our culture, look at this. Oh, there's nothing. It's a desert. Oh, it cost 5 million. So they keep selling us nothing. And all the politicians are directly the business owners. In America, if you want to steal, you want to have a kickback and you want to try to do loopholes, and the kickback wouldn't be noticeable. In our region, it's not even a shame. It's public. The minister of, let's say, communication owns the import-export trade for mobile phones or relative business. They own it. It's not even a conflict of interest. It's something they are proud of. So I'm explaining this because my theory is it's a money factor. The foreign governments actually come back and deal with them. And I know for a fact they know that. They know how the deals are done, the ownership, how it's affecting the people. They know they control the banks. They know that even if I transfer right now someone back home, I'll be funding the militia. They know that. So if the Western government wanted to help, that's one way, is actually by targeting this infrastructure or telling these businessmen, oops, you're out of business. They can do that. You can drive someone out of business. On the other hand, I never seen someone work on that because they were always like, oh, we can't protest because we will get punished. And that I understand. But recently I started to think another way, like our people can do it by themselves, is total civil disobedience. Stop paying everything. Stop paying taxes because we, I swear to you, till now, you have, let's say, no electricity in Lebanon, and they tell you they're gonna punish you. Then people go around and pay the fees. They tell them we're gonna do road checks for the car tabs. People go pay car tab. Why do you pay that and fund them when they don't give anything in return? You pay tax, you get roads, you get services. We pay taxes, we get nothing. So if a movement want to do it from people's side, I think a civil disobedience will drive them bankrupt in a very, very short time. Or at least show them like, oh, we can pressure you. But the best way is for foreign governments to actually cut business ties with the same tyrants they know and then blame us for it. You can't, listen, if you have $1 billion right now, whatever area you live in, you can make it your own cartel. No doubt. So I think that's it, the financial infrastructure.
A lot of my thinking aligns with you that the economy is part of the financial structure. I guess I was thinking about it a little differently, but what you said makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about, okay, Israel's gonna, obviously their goal was we get rid of Hamas, pretty much, root out, right?
Not gonna totally happen.
Not gonna totally happen, but they're gonna take out a lot, I imagine. But, as people will say, well, there's just going to be, look, now you've killed all these people and there's going to be a new Hamas. So what are steps that they could take to ensure that there isn't a new Hamas? I have my own thoughts a little bit about this, but I'm curious.
Lebanon showed me a different example because in Lebanon, there wasn't 2 factions. There was also more like 10. And when they took arms, or those who surrendered arms, or they took their financial network, they collapsed. While Hezbollah was still getting much funding. If you cut the funding, they're gonna collapse. Instead of having this drag 10 centuries, it can drag 3 years or 5 years, which is much more possible. Most people like, also if you want to connect it to religion is a very good scheme to keep those in power with the promise of poor people. Oh yeah, don't worry, I mean, it's okay you're poor, you're going to heaven.
Right.
It's okay if you blow up, you're going to heaven.
And I've seen
So
enough interviews with people on the ground that they really believe it, like in a sincere
they
way.
do.
They believe that that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna be surprised, but they do.
No. Yeah, that's well, I guess the way I was thinking about it is okay, well, they're going to finish what they're going to do there, but then I think there needs to be some sort of a force to maintain, the peace in that region. I don't think it should be an Israeli force necessarily, but more so to de-radicalize. So kind of the same approach that you've had in with Germany, Japan, and then and a pathway
Listen,
towards building new things.
listen.
And yeah.
Let's not forget. They are still paying money for the militias right now. America, UK, France, everyone, they are paying money today.
Mm-hmm.
And then they talk about the militia. Now, a practical example. UN, I have an old beef with UN since ages, not just today, since early 2000. Because when I went for financial aid for an urgent heart operation to someone close to me, I had to go. They literally, this I didn't go by myself. They actually told me where to go to the leaders on the camps to get their allegiance and alliance to sign for me to go back and get financial aid. So I know how it works. This is one thing. You want to hire a humanitarian organization, then you hand the administrative duties to the militia. What did you do? You actually handed the whole organization. I don't doubt the organization is getting money. Let's assume you have the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But I am in need. And you tell me to go take my need from the militia that put me in need. So what did they ask for? They asked for allegiance. Did I want to offer that? No, but did I? I did. I so actually to be honest, I actually made allegiance to over 10 factions on that tweet.
Wow.
Because I didn't care. You're signing 5%, I'm with you. You're signing 10%, I'm with you. So I did go through all the camps, all the leaders, all the stuff like that. I said I signed up as a member, blah blah blah. I needed this financial aid. They gave it to me. I did it. So imagine more dangerous cases. Imagine much more. It starts like that. Now, not everyone will do the same as me because I know no one gonna really track me. But sometimes it's a hook and it works. My question is, why didn't UN just give me the money without sending me to get that paper done? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that supposed to be money coming for me or for my community? We don't get that. And people say, the UN is taking millions. Yes, our leaders are taking millions. Another thing, which is, so there's a lot of stories. There's no way we can sum everything. But every time we talk, I remember a clue or another thing. So when I used to work with the organization, I also had access to faxes, to communication, to stuff like that. So I used to know, like, my salary, which was around, let's say, $400 maybe back then, which was
Mm-hmm.
technically, uh, it was a fine salary for a technician, for a computer programmer, early 2000. But the registered salary was like 1,000 something. So I realized even my salary and other people would come for they would send something different than what we get paid. Now we sign a slip, but we don't know what's happening in the back end. So they create a parallel. So you wanna do a humanitarian organization? They're doing the same with the Syrian refugees. Let's not pretend it's just Palestinians. Syrian refugees are signing up. They get some of the pay, but because there are millions of them, they have a lot of loopholes to sign up more people, to sign up people who are actually not refugees, to collect more money of them. And then, of course, they pay the refugees $200 a month to survive.
Yeah.
and I don't know how much they collect on their behalf. Because again, I think if you did all the work, send someone to at least administer this aid. Like have the same foreign government, the contributor, the donors to actually, correct that job.
Directly. Yeah.
So however you look at it, I keep going back to the money. Someone's getting paid. You're paying the mafia, and you're telling the people, get rid of the mafia. But you, let's say in this example, you're America or you're Canada or you're Europe. So you're blaming me for not being able to fight the person you're funding. It's not really logic.
That makes sense. Do you feel any sense of optimism about the future of this conflict right now?
As any conflict, I think anything can be changed in a year, 2 years, 5 years with a clear plan. But if you keep doing the same thing, of course not. So if right now, I think there's an opportunity, despite the tragedy, there's an opportunity. So one of the conditions which everyone has talks in passing is reconstruction, right? Everyone agrees there's going to be reconstruction. Why? Now, I'm going to sound evil. I'm not advocating against reconstruction, but I'm advocating for why not simple conditional reconstruction. I will build you a palace as long as you don't allow someone to ruin it. I will build you the electricity and internet and housing and jobs, but you need to make an election. We'll give it to your government. If your government is Hamas, we don't want to pay you. Very clearly, let Iran pay you. Let Qatar pay you. If you want to do that, that's your choice. I'm pro-choice. If you want your choice, do it. Even the argument, if they want to settle the argument, I pretend most of my people are against war, but the loud voices are the evil ones. They want to prove me wrong. Fine, I'll concede. But give the people the choice. Why do you want to make the judgment? Why me and you cannot now agree or prove which side is going to be, the majority?
Yeah.
But there's one thing I advocate for. I will keep advocating for. Living in America, let's say if the Democrats in power and I'm a Republican or vice versa, isn't a danger on my life. So it's okay to live under a different political movement than what I believe in. So, but this is not the same when you let people living under any IRGC axis. Give people a choice. If they were living like it's okay, fine, it's political, but it's not. I advocate for giving people a choice. If they want to leave, sometimes they take millions in a day. Sweden, Germany, Europe, America, Canada, they all get millions in a day. Immigrants. They can actually solve the whole crisis by 1 day quota of immigrants. They can do it on their conditions. Now they have people advocating for Hamas in Toronto and in New York. But when you say let's give visas to innocent Gazan, some people will say, no, you're getting the terror here. No, I'm sorry, you already have the terror here. I think it's time to get the better people and kick the people you don't like out or who do not conform under the law of your country. I mean, when I took my nationality, I agreed to that, right? I signed for allegiance. I signed for loyalty. So if I don't do that, I didn't do my part of the deal. So do that. Do your own law. I'm not. I might not accept everything mentally with the American law, but I signed the deal. I wish I had been offered that deal back home. I would sign it. If I want to. If I like it, I sign it. If I don't, give me a choice to go sign another contract. Like let's think of it as a job. I don't like my job. I want to work another job. That's simple. Can I? This is my question. Can I change jobs or not? So it's being overcomplicated, but we can uncomplicate it. We can advocate for choice. You don't like the people here? Advocate your government. Change. When you make the contract, don't make a new law. I'm not even asking to make any change in the Western law. I'm asking to apply their own law. You don't like terrorists? Why do you pay them money? You don't like bad people? Why do you let them in? You want good immigration because this is also scientifically known. They need the bodies.
Yeah.
They need population. Fine. Why are you depriving good, honest people from this chance, but allowing those people who make money, technically the money you paid them because you sent them the money and they immigrated with it. So there's a cycle. Anyone who worked in business knows it. Why? Because this is a little relative, as I said before, because businesses are owned by politicians. So if you want to be a successful businessman, you have to be a successful uh, politician, or at least know how to navigate with the politicians, because you're going to be paying a lot of bribes, a lot of under the table deals, a lot of stuff, which is how I earned all my knowledge, by doing all of this bad stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, choice is a very important thing, and I hope that that could be a focus.
yeah,
I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I probably have a billion
my
other
pleasure.
questions, so we'll maybe we'll do chat more. But
My
if,
pleasure. Like you said, I used to follow you since a long time, and I used to know about this critical thinking. I never thought we'd be today talking about politics, but I always enjoyed your questions because I think of the same, like, not the same question specifically, but I like people thinking this and that, like seeing the other side.
I really appreciate that, and I didn't even know that until you said it. So that makes me pretty happy, actually, because
Definitely. I'm sure many people already do that.
yeah, but I feel like I've been feeling a little bit frustrated because, as you might surmise from some of my posts, at people's unwillingness to apply critical thinking when it comes to things that they really hold on to, these beliefs, and they get pretty defensive or even aggressive at times. And it was a bit disappointing to see, because a lot of those people were the same people who were saying, "Oh, we need critical thinking," and they were cheering me on when I was advocating for all of that. And then it's like, oh, when it
Yeah,
applies to
although
something,
I noticed, I mean, some of the questions you asked aren't really a question. They are the answer within the question, but people don't realize it. So
no.
they jump to the discussion while it's in the question. All you're supposed to do is do the two parts of the question, and then you're done. I
Yep.
know.
And sometimes the things I ask are more like, I am genuinely just curious to see how people think of something. But you're right. A lot of the time, the question is the answer. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. A pleasure to speak to you. And
Same here. My pleasure, really.
thank you.